Welcome, everyone. I see there's some people still joining us, but we've got a lot to talk about, and I'm kind of keen to hear all about the fruit market today. So I'm just going to kick off. I'm delighted today to welcome you to the fifth of our special awards categories in detail session. Our judges at the RIAS awards this year were Katrina Hill, Nick Hayhurst, Daisy Narayan, and Simon Branson. And from the 17 shortlisted projects, we have 5 special category awards. This is the last in detail session about them, but you will be able to have a look at the previous ones on YouTube, including Northgate Housing by Page and Park, The Borough by John McCaslin, Simon Square by Fraser Livingston, and Ardagh by Moxon. This session 2 will be on YouTube, and so it will be recorded. And I think you'll find that it's a really excellent opportunity to hear a bit more about the projects that have won. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by the team from the Fruitmarket Gallery, who were winners of an RIAS award, but also the Client Award, which was sponsored by the Survey Association. Today, we're joined by Neil Gillespie and David Anderson from Reiach and Hall, and Fiona Bradley, who's the client important from the Fruitmarket, as well as Oliver Viney, who is the key sponsor from the Survey Association. As I mentioned, it will be recorded and shared, but also I just wanted to highlight there's a question and answer button at the bottom of the screen. So if you've got any questions at all, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll deal with them all at the end. So I'm really looking forward to that. First of all, I'd like to hand over to Oliver, who is a Managing Director of Atlantic Geomatics and is the current Vice President of the Survey Association. Thanks, Oliver.
Thanks, Karen. Just a bit of background. So the Survey Association is the trade body for land survey companies across the UK. We've around 200 members across the whole of the United Kingdom, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and England. Ranging from some small family-run businesses up to some large multi-billion-pound consultancies as well. We've been working closely now with the RIAS for probably 4 or 5 years. And when the opportunity arose to sponsor the Client of the Year award, we we jumped at the chance. One of our visions at the Survey Association is that every company that has a survey requirement will prefer to use a member of our association. I think if there's architects on the call and those present, you'll appreciate that every project needs some form of survey, measured survey, whether that's using existing data or a fresh survey, and the quality of that survey can often be critical to the success of a project, and the information that's on that survey can be really important. We take pride in the members that we have as part of the association. We have fairly strict entrance criteria for those that want to join the association, and that entrance criteria is based on the quality of the work that they produce, not necessarily other things, but it looks at the whole of the business, but like I say, strictly on the quality of the work. And that's why we take some pride in, if you get time, to have a look at our website and have a look at some of the member companies that we have. And I'd encourage you to use our members if you do need to survey in the future. But thank you for the opportunity to work with you guys, and look forward to hearing more about the Fruitmarket Gallery project.
Thanks very much, Oliver. I mean, without these sponsors, we wouldn't be able to have these special category awards. So it's fantastic. We really appreciate your support. Before I introduce the team, I just wanted to briefly summarise what the jury had said about the project. They thought there was a real clarity of narrative about the design of the Fruitmarket, which was rigorously followed through in each gallery, and that it was obvious that the architects had worked with an inspirational client to develop the agenda, to make it clear. And so we have now in the Fruit Market 2 very distinct spaces for exhibiting and experiencing art. So that really underlines the partnership of the project, and it's for that reason that won the client award. Fiona, the client, critically, is going to kick off first in the conversation. But basically, just to underline that Fiona has had a long career in curatorial work. She has worked at Tate Liverpool as well as the Hayward Gallery, and has been director of the Fruit Market since in Edinburgh, since 2003. And so I think she's going to speak first and give us the client's perspective. And then Neil Gillespie and David Anderson from Reiach and Hall are going to talk about the design of the project and that side of how they worked with Fiona. I think Neil's going to talk mainly, and David's going to join us for the Q&A. I'm not sure that Neil needs an introduction. However, he's an award-winning architect who many of us will know and revere his work. His projects include the Beer Art Centre and the Nuclear Archive for NDA in Wick. David is the project architect, not only for these projects, but also for the engine shed in Stirling and the Bannockburn Battlefield project. So it's very much the critical team here. Without any further ado, can I just hand over to Fiona for her introduction? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, I should probably start by saying how ridiculously excited we all are at the Fruit Market to receive this award. So thank you very, very much to the Survey Association and to the RIAS. It's very nice. When we were at the award ceremony, we were listening to the citation of the award and thinking, that's a nice award to win. And then it was us. So that's very, very lovely. Thank you both very much. I'm going to talk for maybe 10 minutes, maybe not as much as that, just a little bit about the brief for the project and a little bit about the Fruit Market. The Fruit Market, I'm sure most of you know, we're a publicly funded organisation, we're an independent exhibition space. We don't have a collection, we don't own anything, we borrow works of art and we show them to the public. We've been here for 50 years. We are a fruit market building. It's extraordinary that I have to say that, but lots of people don't necessarily know that we are an old fruit market. Our current exhibition works beautifully and plays into our history as a fruit market. We're showing the work of Ibrahim Mahama, an artist from Ghana, I show everybody, every artist that we ever work with, I take on a trip down to show them how the fruit market is on columns over Waverley Station. And he's the first artist who's got really properly excited about the railway, largely because the Gold Coast Railway, built by the British in what is now Ghana, in order to transport gold around the country and out of the country, was built at the same time and of the same materials by the same people as Waverley Railway Station and the Fruit Market Gallery, the fruit markets over the station. So that's a very nice thing. But anyway, I don't digress. That's what we're for. We show art to people. We show art to about 200,000 people a year. We've been here for 50 years, but the building hadn't been refreshed or renovated since Richard Murphy's redevelopment project of it in the early 1990s. And I have to say, as Karen said, I was appointed in 2003. I was appointed to extend the fruit market. That was the brief on which I was appointed. It took us quite a long time to get to the point where we could do that. And the thing that we felt more important originally than extending the fruit market at that point was to develop the program and get the program to the point that the program was demanding the extension of the gallery. And two things really were the tipping point for that. One was our exhibition with Janet Cardiff and George Beers Miller in 2008. The exhibition, The House of Books Has No Windows, for the festival 2008. It was the most successful exhibition the Fruit Market had ever had. They were queuing out the door. It became very obvious that we were running an international art space in a seriously underdeveloped, in a scout hut, basically, not in an international art. We were running an international art exhibition in a space that wasn't an international art gallery, and something needed to be that we didn't have enough. The facility, we didn't have enough toilets, we didn't have enough lighting, it was all generally shoddy. We realized that that the quality of our building was not matching up to the quality of our program. So that was one thing that really set us on the journey to properly think about the building. The second week, we ran a mini festival in spring 2018 and 19, looking at what would happen if we changed the spaces and we added additional spaces and we added additional art forms. What if we started to work across art forms? And we realized there was a huge appetite for that. So those two things really were the impetus for developing the building. And at that stage, what I said I wanted to wait for in 2003 was happening. We were bursting out of the building. The program had got to the point the building could no longer contain it. So we did several feasibility studies and we took two decisions. The first was to stay here, to stay in this building on columns over Waverley Railway Station. It's a great location. It's very easy to find. It's right in the city. Neil will talk beautifully, I know, because Neil does, about its location between the old and new towns, which is very important to the concept of the fruit market. It also has a lot of problems. There's no back door. There are no foundations. We hover over the station. Waverley Bridge, as we all know, Market Street, as we all know, but no one else does, really isn't a street, it's a bridge. David Anderson in particular knows the levels on which the building is built and the street is built, and it's a nightmare, but the location has a lot going for it. So we decided to stay here, and we had the opportunity, as we were beginning to set the brief, to acquire the lease of the building next door. The then Director General of the National Galleries said to me that there's a Dutch proverb, you only get to acquire your neighbour's house once. And it seemed to me that's a very good proverb. Actually, seize the opportunity, but also if you do get to acquire your neighbour's house, you should do it. It gives good things. So it enabled us to expand the building that way. Where we first started thinking about the building, we thought we might have to go up and down. Into the air at the top of the building, which would be difficult because it would impede the views across the valley, which you all architects, you know much more about that than I do. And the other option was to go down into the space beneath the fruit market, which is contested space between the fruit market, the city council, and the railway. So that was that. So going sideways, much easier. We had various false starts, the largest being encouragement from the Heritage Lottery to apply to them for substantial money, which led to an ambitious design involving scaffolding over the railway, to replace the roof, to unify the two spaces. 2 years and several £1,000s later, they didn't give us money, so we started again. And thank God we did, because at that point, Neil and David came into the project and we were able to work with Reiach architects. And I want to talk a little bit about our brief to Reiach. But I suppose the most important thing, the fruit market, the vision of the fruit market is that we provide opportunity and inspiration for artists and audiences. And I would say that Neil and David are both of those things. They're artists. Architects are artists. They have visions. They have ideas. They're also crucially part of our audience, and they know the fruit market inside out. They know what it is to visit the fruit market and to hold the fruit market dear. And that was really obvious every single day of working on this project, that we were working with people who cared as much as we did about the building from the point of view of visitors, and that's what we're for. So what we asked for was something for artists. We asked for clean and honest finishes. The building had got to the point where it was layer upon layer upon layer of paint, and we wanted clean and honest finishes. We wanted unobtrusive, logical architectural decisions, something that our audiences and our artists understood and that matched the ambition of how artists work now. Something for artists. What would excite artists? Give us a space that will excite artists and will match how artists work now at scale and across art forms. Ladies and gentlemen, they gave us the warehouse. Thank you very much. We also said for audiences, please access. The access around the fruit, into and around the fruit market was appalling. We thought it was very important that we ended up with a building that offered equality of access around the building. So everybody is seeing everything in the same order and at the same time. We didn't want a separate disabled entrance around the back. We wanted everything to happen at the same time. And I know Neil will talk beautifully about tiny decisions that were taken, seemingly tiny decisions to move front doors by 90 degrees, to move the lift by 90 degrees, all of which meant that people who weren't using a stepped access were arriving places at the same place as people who were. Really, really important. We also took a big decision to move, for staff, to move us out of the middle of the building. The office we had was right in the center of the building, and we moved that to the edge of the building so that we had a new space for audiences, for education right in the middle. So those were the main audiences and artists all the time, audiences and artists, access and excitement, opportunity, inspiration. Those are the things that we work with. We also had a great conversation early on about money. As I say, we had a big scheme that we were never going to be able to build. This was a small racing yacht of a scheme, something really enormous value for money, something, can we basically do it on the cheap and make it not look like that? How do we do that? And one of the things I said very early on was we make a lot of books at Fruitmarket. We're a publisher. And I know that if you make a book using the actual size of a paper sheet rather than something bespoke, it's a lot cheaper. I remember saying to Neil and David, is there something similar in architecture? If you use the actual size of a sheet of MDF, does it help? Yes, it does. And Neil saying to me also, think about renovating your bathroom. If you keep everything where it is, it's a lot cheaper than if you move the toilet over to the other side of the room. And that, I think, is as a principle we have. What if we keep things where we are? So therefore, not a new entrance in the middle of the building, not completely changing everything, but the same old fruit market, really, much, much nicer, much more honest, much more integrity in the materials, and this great new space next door. So we got to keep everything that everybody loved about the fruit market. We didn't ruin it, but we added this extra thing next door. I think we managed to do that partly because we were trying to do it cheaply, but mostly because Reiach Hall architects, Neil and David, are members of our audience. As I say, they held the fruit market dear from the beginning. So we're lucky. We were lucky with Reiach Hall. We wanted to build it like an artwork. We wanted to think it through together. We wanted to have idea after idea after idea with them, listen to their ideas and help them realize them. We did it in stages. We understood every stage. We were lucky, really lucky with our architects. I think talking to other people who've built buildings, I don't know that they still like each other. I think we can all say we still do, which is very, very nice. We were unlucky, however, with the pandemic. And I think we need to all remember that. We built this building through the pandemic. At one point, none of us had been in it. David was in it and showing us all of it on Zoom. We all got very good at Zoom. I think I first saw the warehouse on my iPad on David's phone. It's incredibly. We wanted to build this in a hands-on way, and we couldn't as clients. But I think we managed to get around that. We were unlucky with that, but we have it now, and I think you can tell how much we love it. It's everything we hope for. It has material integrity. It has ideas oozing out of every pore. Our audience understand it. The artists we work with absolutely love it. And as I say, our current exhibition, the bit of the exhibition that's in the warehouse itself is part of the work. The maker's stamps on the beams, the resonance of using the old floor to use it again, the actual material is part of the artwork that the artist has built in there. And that's a really rare thing. And I think, yeah, it's down to these guys. I'll be quiet now. I hope my enthusiasm for the building shines out, and my enthusiasm for this award, which I'm very, very proud to have won.
Thank you very much, Fiona. That was absolutely fantastic to hear. And I think the award just fits exactly everything that you've been talking about. So to go to the other side of this love marriage, shall we go? Love's coming up a lot here, actually. When I saw the building, I thought, I love this. So without any more sort of gushingness from my part, Neil, could you lead us through the process?
I'll try. That's a pretty difficult act to follow. You can all hear me, yeah? Yeah, great. Yeah, you get a flavour of what wins a Client of the Year award. I mean, I think I could say a lot, but I think I'll keep it very short. I think one of the things I think we recognised in Fiona and her team, a special mention to Amida there, it's really the courage, really, you know, to go with this project. As Fiona said, it happened in COVID, but that was one of the issues, you know, working over a railway, all of these things, existing building, a tight budget, everything was very, very challenging. And you'll sense that Fiona has very strong opinions, views, which is fantastic because Fiona challenged us at every stage. And I think that's terrific. But it was always done with a sense of humor. And I think that's really fundamental to, I think, life, I think, is to address these issues, but to retain a sense of humanity. And so we were really thankful to be involved. I wouldn't say too much more, but yeah, recognize the courage of your client, the risk that the organization was taking on board and taking on this challenge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some of the themes, and I'll miss a lot of stuff, I'm sure. And David will pick everything up, as he has always done. David and I have worked together for a long time, and I get to make all the mistakes. Let's see, is this going to change slide, is it? How do I do that? No. Do I have to share again, do I? Is that sharing? Yeah. Okay. Quick mention of design team. Obviously, it's more than Fiona, David, and I. There's a big team and the Fruitmarket Gallery who are individually fantastic and together, yeah, formidable. And then our own design team. I won't go into detail, but Narrows, Max Fordham, Garner and Theobald, everybody worked really hard to do as best we could. I'm going to start with this slide, really, which is a slide I often start with. And Fiona has actually started to talk about these opposites, these kind of dualities that seem to be occurring throughout the whole of the project. And I love this image by Utamaro, this young woman looking at a mirror, looking at herself in a mirror, and this notion of the real and the unreal. She's real, but her image is her, but it's unreal. It's not her. And I often console myself that the image that I'm looking at in the mirror is not as ugly as it looks in real life. But so what you see is not necessarily what you get. And it seemed to me that there was this project in many ways exemplified this idea of duality constantly through the whole thing. So that image is really important to me because I think as architects, we're always sitting in this kind of in-between place, between practice and theory, between thinking and making, between imagining something and then experiencing it. And in this case, between tradition and innovation, demolition and retention, there was all these kind of pluses, minuses, and we'll come on to this, black, white. And the ones down at the bottom, I think, are really interesting. The idea of the abstract and then the figure or the figurative started to come out and as we developed the project. And then there's the individual as to how they experience art as a very personal experience. And then the idea of the collective. So the new gallery space was moving it much more into that collective experience and allowed the gallery to do more of that. And so we'll start off with the real, and Fiona's already mentioned this, but these are great images from the 1950s of Market Street in its heyday with all the fruit vans. And they would be distributing fruit that had arrived by rail, come up through the floor of the Fruitmarket Gallery, both galleries, and then distributed by lorries to the various fruit and veg throughout the city. So an amazingly interesting event happening there. And so really we were talking about, on paper, 2 buildings, but in actual fact, it's more complicated than that. And David knows this story inside out. But so we're looking at the elevation from looking north. So on the right-hand side, we've got 45 Market Street, the original gallery, 1931. So that was initially converted in the 70s by John L. Patterson. I remember John, but there won't be many people who do. and then major redevelopment by Richard in the early 90s. And so the building went from a market to a gallery. The building 36 to 39 is in two phases, and you can see that now in the building between 1890 and 1931, and that's had many lives. Some more savoury or unsavoury than others, but we'll get to that. So there was this very interesting archaeology that Fiona referred to, that David really started to do a lot of digging. The other thing to notice is that Market Street is not level. So one of the big issues was, as Fiona said, was accessibility and creating access through all of the gallery spaces. So the level in Market Street is interesting. And then we started to get into kind of more thematic, or maybe architectural or narrative, that was really interesting to us. So it began to talk about, we're talking about two spaces, two types of activity. At one level, it's white and black, light and dark. We used the Apollo and Dionysus, which, yeah, I enjoyed that. Apollo is, the values of Apollo are to do with order and harmony. So there was one side of us that wanted, that was about that. But then we all have a darker side, I'm sure. Although my darker side is now starting to collect fountain pens, which is not that dark anymore. But anyway, that's another story. But so Dionysus is much more emotional, much darker in phases. So Dionysus was, on the one hand, was happy and joyous, but other times could be angry and violent. And we thought there was something really interesting about the old nightclub, and that seedier side of Edinburgh, if you like, or somebody's existence. We're all like that. That this building could maybe start to talk about that. And the old town and the new town kind of exemplified that as well. This idea of starting afresh in the new town, this more abstract figure of an urban figure, with the old town, which was much more organic and additive. There's the idea of art in the sense of experiencing art. There's the reflective part, where it's you as an individual and what the art says to you, or what you say to the art. But then there was also the opportunities for participation. So the whole education outreach and events that were much more participative. I can't say that word. Then there was the idea of exchange. The collective and the individual I've talked about, the abstract and the figure I'll talk about in a second. But also this notion of absence and presence, the idea of the white cube, where the architect is trying to be absent from the story and let the art come forward. And there was an opportunity here, perhaps, for the architecture or the history of this building to have some presence in the gallery itself. Don't know if any of that made sense. It's hugely lucid to myself. But there's a section through Market Street with a station. And Fiona talked about the building hovering over the railway tracks. It absolutely does. And it's incredibly interesting. So this is the section through Richard's development in the early 90s, which was basically to take the roof off the market, the old market building, and introduce light and space to the top level, when before it was quite narrow. And that gave rise to spaces like this. Now, these are images of after we've done our piece. We were very, very clear at the very beginning that we wanted to retain a real sense of the work that Richard had done. This idea of creating volume, the idea of creating a light, airy space. And that's really where this abstraction comes in, the idea of a space that is ephemeral. And in the next slides, I'll tell you what we actually did there, but we were very, very strong that we wanted to retain as much of that sense of the building as possible. This is a section through the warehouse to the west. And again, you can see it's still hovering over the tracks. And this is a section as built. And you'll see that it's one singular space, but you'll see from the following images that in actual fact, there was a floor, an intermediate floor in there. And David referred to the nightclub days, which So these were the interiors that we discovered. Death Disco. Yeah, it was a very interesting place. That was the lower floor. Above that was another floor with services distributing to that. It was full of pigeons. It was a pretty grim kind of place. We then set about clearing that. So all of that interior was cleared, and that was what we were left with at phase 1. And so the image on the left is showing it's got a floor above it, and the image on the right is looking at the ground floor with the arched window, which we'll see later on. But there's a floor sitting in there, and we thought that was really interesting element, the floor. The floor was stiffening the whole structure, so Narrows had quite a job when we took that floor out to stiffen the structure, but I'll come back to that. This was a typical drawing that David did, but David can talk to these later on, but really we were working with what we found. And I think I've got a slide that says that. So again, this duality of what we were trying to do, we called it a recalibration of the existing building. What we were saying was we were keeping the spirit and the sense of the original gallery building, but we had to recalibrate it for today, particularly in terms of accessibility. And then the other building, the new warehouse, we had to reimagine that. So it was this recalibration and reimagine all the time. So these drawings I hope you can read them, but the top drawing is the ground floor as existing, and the bottom drawing is the building as built. So on the left-hand side of the top building, you see everything's greyed in, but that's the existing nightclub, and you can see all of the downtakings that happened in there in red. On the right-hand side, the red are the elements which changed on the original gallery scheme. And you can see that most of the walls, most of the elements were changed. Virtually everything was changed. But what we were trying to do was to make it feel as if it hadn't changed. And you'll see very subtle things have changed. For example, where you see a line of seats and tables, that partition between it and the gallery space moved slightly to detach the column. And I'll show you that on the image. Toilets were completely rearranged so that we got accessible toilets. We had a new entrance that allowed wheelchair access off very narrow pavement at Market Street. The block of red on the right-hand side is the lift. And on the drawing below, you'll see that that lift was turned through 90 degrees. And on the upper plan, you'll see why we did that. At the other end of the main gallery space was a little kitchen. That was taken out and moved to the north into a sizable kitchen. And then that allowed us to open the existing gallery through to the new gallery. So suddenly we had a view that was virtually the entire length of the two combined buildings. And at the other end of the warehouse, we created another core, another set of toilets, a workshop, and another entrance. So what effectively that means is that the two buildings can work together, but they can also act independently. So you could access an event going on in the warehouse without going through the original gallery. I won't go into too much more detail. The upper level, the grey, the original was just the right-hand side, and you can see that we changed a few of the partitions on the left-hand side. That was the admin area that Fiona talked about. We moved that to the new building, and that became an education suite with pantry and library and sinks and things to enable that to operate. At the other end, the stair, we tried to simplify the stair. We tried to create something which was more mute, if you like, in the space. You can see now where the lift, we moved the partition, which was the little pre-gallery, if you like, at the head of the stairs, so that on the new building, when you arrive at the head of the stair, you're not in the gallery space. You're actually in a space between the gallery space And what that meant was that somebody coming out the lift was arriving at exactly the same moment in the plan as someone coming up the stairs. So they were getting the same experience. You then move into the gallery space. And on the opposite warehouse, we now have a double height space. And at the upper level there, we have a new administration, meeting room, etc. So, and a new lift. So on the left-hand side, a new entrance, which allowed a bit of space off Market Street for someone to negotiate a front door, which was really important to try and get people in. And then the spirit, I think, of the ground floor hasn't really changed, but everything has been moved. So the kitchen is gone, so you see right through to the neon work at the very end of the second warehouse. Detaching the wall from the columns meant that we could run this banquette seating along that and create a more generous cafe area, kitchen, server, etc. Bookshop changed. So basically trying to make that the whole front to Market Street a very legible and easily accessible route. A new stair. Now, the new stair was really for a number of reasons, really. One, this is the main gallery spaces on the ground floor really didn't change at all. We tidied up some of the servicing and put it up into the structure. But this main move is really where one of these other little bits of narrative that excite us, but maybe not so much anybody else. The fact that it was a concrete stair was really important, because it gave the stability to that movement between the ground and the first. We always felt that the art was the thing that was going to excite us and disturb us and make us feel unsure of ourselves or give us joy. What we really wanted the stair to do was really to go from the ground, or upper ground if you like, to the first floor, simply and stable, in a stable kind of way. But we were also very aware that this concrete is hovering over a station. So the idea of putting something really massive on something which isn't touching the ground really appealed to us. And so that element of concrete became really our only intervention in the old gallery. At the same time, we're always influenced by artists of people who really inspire us. And a friend of ours, Roger Eichling, and he, lovely artist who died a few years ago, but his work was about using something straightforward as a magnifying glass in the sun to make marks on pieces of wood that had a previous life. That was the important thing, that his new mark wasn't being evasive or in the background. It was equally as important, say, for example, in the hole in that piece of wood, his burning these marks, these parallel lines, was equally as emphatic. It was indelible. And we felt that there was an opportunity to do something like that in the Black Warehouse. At the same time, David and I were working on Kilmartin Museum, and we were really interested in Leverance and this idea of darkness, of shadow being something that could be a really positive, albeit melancholic space, that there was something emotional that could touch us. I think it's called the limbic area of your brain. That's the most fundamental one, when you start to weep for no reason, you know, when you see a dog or something. There's something touches you at a very, very fundamental, archaic kind of level. And there was something about the use of shadow that we thought we could really move for. And I think that's where the courage really of Fiona really came to the fore, to say, let's work with what we find, and let's do it in a very, how can I say, emphatic kind of way. So there's the new elevation. And the partner, if you like, to the stair was the ramp. So referring back to the Market Street and the slope on it, we had to put in a series of ramps to join up all the different levels. And so the ramp along Market Street became this other emphatic move, and you'll see that the grain of the concrete is the same as the step. It's as if the steps have been flattened from the gallery space. So what you get is you get this parallel pavement inside the building. So it's another one of these opposites and dualities, inside, outside, daylight, night. Is the pavement part of the city, or is the city part of the pavement? You got this kind of oscillation between the two. So that's the reality of it. And there is an interesting thing happens, I'm sure Fiona sees it, is that when people are walking down the pavement outside, you find yourself walking in step with them, which is a bit weird. But anyway, so the ramp became something. And then this warehouse space. And the next element, so that's looking back into the cafe. And what we, again, and again, I think a really quite a bold move, I would hope anyway, was that the floor that I talked about on when we excavated the building with its rafters and its floorboards, we turned that through 90 degrees effectively. So that floor became a wall. So the columns on the verticals on the screen here are the old rafters. And that became the figure that I was talking about, that Leverance has with his cross. This is a screen that represents the floor that was once there, if you like. And again, there was another reversal, which I think is interesting, or I thought was interesting. This was an early drawing, was that the lower level would be not quite opaque, but would be closed, and the upper level would be capable of being opening. So it's a kind of reversal of what you would imagine. The notion that the ground floor opens, actually the ground floor doesn't, it's closed, but the upper level opens, but no one can access it. So that you get this ambivalence between the two. But what it does do is you'll see that there's windows on the old warehouse at the upper level. It means that you get views, you can see it, you get long views into the old town, because the old town is about verticality, whereas the new town is about horizontality. So you've got these, again, these dualities. These are just reference to Japan and to the screens that you would get on facades on the Japanese street, say in Kyoto. So working with the timber, we did want to use tar, but fire was precluded that. But this idea of a tarred substance. And then once you then move into the gallery space itself, the steel, that was really working with what we found, the steel that we found, and the additional steel that had to go in to stiffen the structure now that the floor wasn't in. And again, there's a reference back to Japan and these Minka structures where Japan, that fondness for shadow, where we have a fondness for light, there's this revered kind of sense of darkness. We thought there was a real connection there between the two. I'm getting to the end now. And then the last three slides, a couple of slides I just wanted to show was, I mean, the joy for us is really the exhibitions that are happening in there. It's just staggering, the things that are happening there. And this was the opening exhibition with Carla Black. That was 2021. And the materials that Carla was using were troubling, really challenging. And that's precisely why we follow artists. You know, there's idea of materiality in this one, which is just, well, I still can't get my head around it. It's mounds of earth with gold leaf. So there was a really, really interesting, that Dionysian notion where your emotions are, there's the smell of earth. Amazing. And then they've finished with the last two slides. Sorry, that's us looking at the arched window, which then pulls itself into the space, the view up to the old town. But this, I know Fiona knows that I was besotted by this exhibition by Martin Boyce, which is just recently finished. I thought it was an amazing exhibition, and I think Richard's roof has never looked more beautiful. I think with that suspension underneath it was like blossom. It was beautiful. But then the use of the warehouse as a kind of transitional where the work is neither on show nor is it in storage. There was an ambivalence there, which was really interesting. And just the title of the show, Before, Behind, Between, Above, Below, kind of summed up what we were trying to do completely, I think. You know, above, below, between, amazing. And finally, this show installation by Mark Cousins, called Like a Huge Scotland on Wilhelmina Barnes Graham, I really love, because again, it was talking about those opposites. Wilhelmina Barnes Graham as a young woman and as an old woman. And the screens were such that you could walk around them and you would see her as she would have seen herself looking in a mirror. So it goes back to my original thing, and the sound, the speakers were Wilhelmina Barnes Graham speaking about her as a young woman. This kind of looking back was really, really, really powerful. So I suppose what I'm saying is that we get a huge amount out of the exhibitions that are coming on, and we never know how it's going to look in the next page. Sorry, I've blathered and it's been a bit wittering. Apologies for that, but sorry about that. I don't know if David wants to add anything. I'm sure he does.
I think we should just go to questions, Neil.
Okay.
Indeed, I don't think it was blethering at all, Neil. It was a lovely structured discussion of the building and how you got there. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A, so please, if you've been sitting on them, do put them there. Whilst everyone's gathering their thoughts, maybe some reflections from myself. Neil, you described the courage on the part of your client here, and it's obvious in terms of the big moves and what happened, at the new gallery. However, I just wonder, Fiona, Neil, the tweaks, they need courage as well, and I think that's what I'm kind of interested in, because I know when I went there, I felt that the existing building, if we can call it that, the gallery felt just in, as you say, in the spirit of the old fruit market. It felt like the old fruit market, but clearly it works so much better in access terms and in spatially, specifically in the ground. And so I just wondered, these were all quite small moves. And I just wondered, was there a need to persuade, or did you need persuaded, Fiona, about the importance of actually just making these small moves? Because to me, they're part of the joy of the building. It retains its spirit, but at the same time, it works just so much better.
I'm sure there are a couple of things that I was deeply resistant to. But most of them, I think we were really ready. I know I knew the building inside out. I've been here since 2003. I've put art in it. We're a building organization. We build wall partitions. We knock them down. We know the sight lines. I know my body knows the building. And it's only actually now putting art into the existing spaces, that I understand properly the tweaks that Neil and David have made, because sometimes my body doesn't understand it anymore. And I'll say, well, stick that in the middle of this bay. And I'll go, oh, the bay that's not the center anymore. The center's over here. And that's really, really interesting, because it looks exactly the same, but it actually isn't, because things are tweaked. And that is, very clever that I slightly didn't realize that was happening until it's happened, but it works. And I'm beginning to understand it again. But most of the small things, we're just like, why didn't we think of that years ago? Why does the lift come out in the middle of the exhibition space? Why? There's no need. And Neil and Dave, just turn it 90 degrees. That's all we need to do. It was the tiny things are, you're right to pick them out. They're the big things, actually.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I use the word recalibration, in my youth, I used to be in one of these small bore rifle club things that you do when you're young, and you constantly had to recalibrate the sites depending on conditions, and it seems to me that architects create something with their client and the builders and the design team, and we build it. And then it then starts to live a life, and the conditions change. So we know that issues of accessibility now are so much more at the fore than they would have been 20, 30 years ago. We know that sustainability, so the idea of reusing the floor as the screen, that ties into these kind of issues that we're as architects and as clients, owners of buildings, we're dealing with now. We're thinking about those things much more acutely. So I think that recalibration is not so much, it's being honest and just saying, it's moved on. What can we do that will make this?
Yeah, I mean, that seems so vital. It's what have we got and how can we make it into something that is, super functional and super architecturally inspiring.
I think that's the challenge for me is not so much the issues of sustainability from a technical side of view. We can do what we can do, but how do you do that and still create something that's got some sort of meaning and some sort of presence? I think that's the real challenge. I think we could hit everything with a kind of with a calculator, but what is it when you move out of that phase? What is it that's going to lift your spirits? And I think the original building had this kind of joy to it, and that's what we felt was the critical thing to retain.
Absolutely. I think there's a question here that kind of leads on from that, and it's an anonymous attendee, but they're asking what brought the Japanese influences to the fore? Was it something you were responding to in the history of the building, or the local context, or a wider influence you refer to when looking at that feel, emotion, identity, and structure of shadows?
I'll say this, David. Yeah, it's really me, I suppose. Yeah. I think it's Hans Meyer said that the Scots and the Japanese share I can't remember the exact words, but something like share a notion that the half-said thing is primary, that there is a certain reticence to a Japanese aesthetic, which I think has a real resonance with I wouldn't call it Scottish, with a northern view of the world. This idea of the half-said thing. You'll know it from your grandparents, or there won't be a lot of chat, but a nod or an eye, right, is enough. And I think so. I've always been attracted to that connection with Japan, and the whole notion of the idea of, I suppose, that book that swept through the West, in Praise of Shadows by Tanizaki. That was a book that really left a mark. This idea that the shadow was an enjoyable place. I mean, Utzon talked about this a lot, actually, talked about how the architect the position of power really isn't in the limelight, isn't standing out in the searchlight. It's standing in the shadow, and that was something he learned from his father, who was a hunter. So that what the architect should do should inhabit the edge or the shadow, because strategically that's a more powerful position, if I'm making myself clear, than being right in the centre of things. So I've always felt that Scotland could work to its strengths. It doesn't. But its architects could work to its strengths and see that peripheral position is really powerful.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. But...
It does. I'm just going to move on to, because time is moving, and maybe David wants to come in on this, because the question was, are there any wider lessons for Edinburgh architecture? I'm kind of curious why Edinburgh architecture, but we'll go into this, and planning about the value of working with green and existing assets while still being contemporary and innovative. How can other clients be encouraged to appreciate this type of approach? David, I don't know if you would like to.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is wrapped up in what Fiona talked about at the beginning. They knew the building intimately well, and there are many galleries who've moved throughout a city centre to different venues promised different things. And I think to stay there, it harks back to the use of the street as a fruit market, with all of those the vans. I mean, that place was absolutely crazy, from God knows 5 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, and then all of a sudden they moved out in 1972, and there was tumbleweed, and the first people who moved in were the art gallery and the nightclub, in that order. And years later, the buildings opposite the Fruit Market Gallery, original, that was built as a speculative warehouse for the fruit and veg markets, and it was converted to a city art centre as well. So it's interesting, having spent most of my working life in Edinburgh, you see a place change, and it's the people who move into these dodgy areas or the places that are not as well loved. And they move there, let's be frank, because it's cheap, it's easy. There's no one to really complain about them, so they can do what they want. And it's great that the fruit market could stay there and continue to do that and contribute to it, because it's a very, very different place. But I think it's all about clients and working with clients when they come to you with a proposition, which is a good one, and about maintaining the conversation. Because a lot of what Neil talked about was, for me, perfect, covered everything. But it's also understanding the rules of the building, the street. It's this notion that Neil or Fiona picked up on it. Over a 62-metre facade, the street and the internal levels only meet twice. So there are challenges in that, but it's understanding how a simple diagram might enliven that the use of those buildings when they're joined together. And again, going back to working as a team, that everybody collaborated on that, every small move. So it's just about keeping your nerve, I guess. Did that answer the question?
I think so.
I think maybe I could add a little bit. I think it's that recalibration thing. You know, the times are changing, and I think the notion of authorship and all of these kind of things are changing. And it'd be interesting to know from Fiona's perspective in terms of the art and the artists and their practice, how that begins to reflect how the fruit market has to change it, because it's a response to societal changes, I suppose. But it doesn't mean to say that old patterns don't still happen as well. You know, it's just they're being added to. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think from our point of view, we knew we needed the building to be as flexible as possible, to welcome the way artists work. And the way artists work will always challenge. Well, you know, I always remember Neil and David's beautiful new wall, the floor turned 90 degrees. The first thing Carla Black said to me when we were walking around the warehouse, is that structural? Does that have to stay there? It's not structural, but I'd love it to stay there for one show. You know, it'd be nice. But, you know, always artists will ask what you can knock down, what you can knock through, what you can change. And I love that. I think that's really important. And I always tell the truth. I always say yes. And they say, but, you know, and obviously Carla ended up not asking us to knock it down, which is very fortunate. But, you know, we have artists like we're looking at Mark's film there, but we've got artists who want to do dance in the warehouse, who want to play music in the warehouse, who want to really push the boundaries of what visual art can be. And the building lets them do that, which is fantastic. And I suppose for me, the important thing to remember about the fruit market, we're like the street. We are like the pavement. We're a public space. We're a public space for culture, and we don't get to decide what the public want to see or what artists want to make. We follow them. We go with them. They push us and we push them. And that, for me, the building lets us do that. And I'm overwhelmed that Neil ends his talk looking at what artists have done to his building. That's why Reiach and Hall, the right architects for this project, they're interested in that. They're equally as interested in artists as we are. And that seems to me quite rare and quite exciting.
I'm afraid the time is up. I've got to say, the gallery brief is an incredibly challenging one for all architects. And it's just fantastic to see this particular project and the synthesis between architecture and curation and public and artist. It's just amazing. So thank you very much, everyone. And again, thank you very much, Oliver, as our sponsor. As I said, without you, this award wouldn't be possible. And Fiona is a very worthy winner, but it's a team effort at the end of the day. And I think what we did see, and I'm just being cheesy again, was a marriage, a love of the building, a love of the programme, a love of the detail, and it's been fantastic to hear. Many thanks indeed. And as I mentioned, this is available on YouTube. Thank you again.
Thank you.